5 dead, 200 injured in clashes between security forces and Morsi supporters. At least 5 people have been killed in clashes with the Egyptian security forces and supporters of Morsi. Egypt arrests 2 top Muslim Brotherhood leaders. They detained 2 senior leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood close to President Morsi. Also, Egypt crisis has Marines in Italy and Spain on alert. So, man, that sends me back to my days in the air wing. So it says here, as Egypt's Morsi digs in his heels despite calls for him to step down, roughly 500 Marines deployed to Italy and in Spain are poised to react if their presence is needed to calm the brewing violence in the North African country. As military deadline nears in Egypt, Morsi vows fight to the death. So he took to the airwaves early Wednesday morning and vowed to fight to remain in office even if the price is my blood. So it says here, I am the president of Egypt. There is no substitute for legitimacy or no alternative. He declared his right to serve out his term as the first democratically elected president in Egypt's long history. Morsi reportedly being held hours after being ousted. So he's supposedly gone. Saudi king congratulates Egypt's new leaders. Saudi King Abdullah has congratulated Egypt's interim leader, saying his appointment comes at a critical time in history in North African country. Which, of course, is interesting because he's probably going to have his own revolt on his hands unless the Zionists keep backing him. The guy's on his deathbed. Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah clinically dead, so I find that hard that he made that quote. 56 Muslim Brotherhood members jailed for planning a coup in the UAE. So this is his territory. And it goes on and says the court in the UAE issued a Tuesday sentence of prison terms ranging between 3 to 10 years on 56 Muslim Brotherhood members accused of planning a coup in the country. Then to Jordan. Jordan blocks 254 news websites on Tuesday. They blocked 254 unlicensed news websites, 16 of them in the previous days, using powers under the 2012 law criticized as a threat to freedom of expression. But you don't have to go all the way to Jordan to get that. Here in the United States, you have a senator saying journalists deserve protection, but will decide who's actually a journalist. So, it says here he's penned an editorial for the Chicago Sun-Times, which he argues that the journalists need some form of government-granted protection, but that the government should decide who the real journalists are and who isn't. This is the same thing that's happening in the UK as well. When he says the media, he's talking about the mainstream Zionist-owned media informs the public, right? No, they engineer consent and tell them what to think here. And holds the government accountable. Sure they do, right? Journalists should have reasonable legal protections to do their important work, but not every blogger, tweeter, or Facebook user is a journalist. So, there you go. For those of you that are new, this is my website, Global Government News. The website is ggnonline.com. There's a poll here, and there's 7 days left to vote. What is your favorite topic for GGN or GGN topic? The war on terror, liberty, sovereignty is what I'm covering now. So far, 35% say that, followed by 57% saying eugenics and social engineering news. President Assad says political Islam in Egypt fails. Says what is happening in Egypt is the fall of what is known as political Islam, he said in an interview. Anywhere in the world, whoever uses religion for political aims or to benefit some and not others will fall, said Assad. You can't fool all the people all the time, let alone the Egyptian people who have a civilization that is thousands of years old and who espouse clear Arab nationalist thought. Yeah, but it's like that one person was saying that was being interviewed. He's kind of an expert in this area, and he tells it the way it is, which is like we use that word to be in a coma. As long as they're fighting each other, whether you have the opposite, whoever the new opposition leader will be, it's going to be controlled opposition. When Morsi, he's controlled opposition, i.e. the Muslim Brotherhood. As long as Egypt doesn't focus on external threats, pan-nationalism, pan-Arab nationalism, which is what Assad represents, along with, Iran is Persian, but same thing, like Saudi Arabia. They could go that way, They could go the Arab way of being proud to be Arab and protecting their brothers and sisters and that. But no, they go with the Zionists, right? It doesn't really matter. The Egyptian people will lose until they can start taking care of not just their own internal affairs, but around externally. And the military basically is Israel's own private army for them to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do. Speaking of which, with these Gulf states, Qatar helps Egypt stave off IMF loan. Remember when Morsi was taking in all these loans and in money from Qatar? And this was back in April of this year. which should tell you something. Egypt cuts diplomatic ties with Syria. Now, this just happened last month, June 16th. President Morsi announces closure of embassies in Damascus and Cairo and calls for imposition of a no-fly zone. So it was kind of interesting that he put that out there, showed who he kind of worked for, or at least who put him there. And then now he's gone. Oil surges to 14-month high over Egypt unrest. Again, another thing to be looking at is gas prices. They just went down almost 50 cents. They were spiked there. Now political unrest in Egypt and concern the turmoil, i.e. speculation, will escalate, have pushed U.S. light crude oil prices to nearly $102 a barrel for the first time since May 2012. So it's the big thing to look at. And of course, this is, it's good for people like Assad who's saying that stuff, but then again, they all have an invested interest, including Turkey, to have peace and stability. Turkish Deputy Prime Minister foreigners Jews behind protests. He issues partial retractions, saying he didn't mean to offend. So, goes on here, and he was quoted as blaming the world powers and the Jewish powers and their influence for provoking massive anti-Erdogan protests in Turkey, going on to say that the international media is also involved in the conspiracy. So it goes on here, and it said it is followed by a statement from a Turkish Jewish organization expressing concern that the comments could lead to reprisals against the nation's Jewish minority. Which is also, fascinating, because they're always a minority in most countries. They call themselves Germans, they call themselves Turks, but they're Jews, and they are not about immersing themselves into that culture. Which is why they like what they have, which is Israel, which is a Zionist Jewish state. They're the only ones that could be nationalistic, which is why I think another reason why they push multiculturalism. It's also interesting, too, I watched this documentary recently about Israel and how they're concerned about the use of the web as a means to spout hate, which they see as anti-Semitism. Just briefly, I found this interesting because it was actually kind of encouraging, because it showed me, they were saying, basically, they kept saying that, it's not like Germany where they can't even say anything, right? And he was saying this seriously. He was like, in the U.S., they just have too much freedom of speech. He was saying that. So it is kind of encouraging, and they are feeling threatened by that. But one of the things that they say is, the code word to Zionists is Jews. Well, you can know why, right? Because most of the, quote, hate speech laws and all this stuff is there to protect Jews and all of these human rights groups. So that's what I figured. For them, the word hate is a code word for truth. That's right. When they say hate speech, they're talking about truth speech. Now, the next thing I have is Jew. They see people like myself and others talking about this stuff, exposing what they're doing, calling Israel, basically with all these people protesting against Palestine, it's a way of protesting against Jews. And so you can basically, the way they see it is you can replace the word Israel with Jews. So all these people are protesting against Jews. This is interesting too, because one of the goals of Germany was to give the Jews their own territory, their own place, so that when shit happens and things are done, they can say, there they are, bomb them or something. They could be held accountable. Not like where they're immersed in every country, entrenched in the media and politics and all that. They aren't ever held accountable. That's why I personally, just not going off all the different conspiracy theories out there and prophecies, is that Israel will be eventually destroyed. And lastly, what I had found out is that they're the only ones that are really allowed to be nationalistic. So when they start talking about nationalism, they're talking about anti-Semitism. So when they talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe, they're talking about, and in the U.S., they're talking about the rise of nationalism. So we're talking about Jewish nationalism, i.e. Jewish supremacism. So if you're against Jewish supremacism and Jewish nationalism, you're an anti-Semite. So it basically shows and illustrates the Jewish global domination mentality. That's what I came up with. Okay, so, you heard about basically him retracting, right? That just goes to show you the power these people have, this group has. Turkish Jews express fears that their deputy prime minister links the Jews to protests. So, Jewish community worried that comments could trigger popular anger against Jews in Turkey. Anger, hate. truth. All right, next up we have Turkey's move to Chinese air systems appalls NATO allies. Turkey leans towards selecting Chinese long-range anti-missile and air defense systems, while NATO allies looked shocked by the possibility of the decision. Afghan army chief says Pakistan controls the Taliban, so a lot of, quote, truth, hate speech coming out of Afghanistan. Fighting in Afghanistan could be stopped in weeks if Pakistan told the Taliban to end the insurgency. And remember, after the elections in Pakistan, as soon as the elections were over with, the CIA and the U.S. commenced the drone strikes. U.S. drone strikes killed 17 North Waziristan, attack targeted a home and vehicle. So just like in Iran, Rouhani in that, and in Pakistan, the new leader, let's see if they fulfill their promises to end the drone strikes, reform, right? Israel seeks $5 billion in U.S. loans to buy arms. So they're reporting to seek U.S. loans of $5 billion to finance the purchase of advanced weapons systems that the U.S. regime has offered the Jewish state under a $10 billion package for its entire Middle East allies. Wow. Syria says 3,500 tons of weapons already sent to the rebels. Lord Ashdown, the former Liberal Democrat leader, spoke out against arming the Syrian rebels and called for pressure to be put on Qatar and Saudi Arabia to cut off funding. Syria opposition to elect new chief in Istanbul. So they're going to nominate a new leader to unify the fractured coalition when members reconvene in Istanbul on Thursday. Israeli troops kidnapped 2 Lebanese. It says here they're crossing technical fence. The Zionist enemy troops kidnapped on Tuesday 2 Lebanese farmers here in Shaba Heights, southern Lebanon. Later on, the enemy military unit took the detained citizens to the radar checkpoint in Mount Hermon. So yeah, we just covered about these female recruits, Zionist army recruits that stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. Occupation troops run over Palestinian and West Bank. Teenager was knocked down and killed by an Israeli military jeep in the southern West Bank. The initial reports suggest soldiers had fired at the youth who had climbed onto the military vehicle. So it's kind of like with these farmers, they antagonize them. They say that they antagonize them, which they probably do. They have every right to, being that they're occupied. But the Lebanese, they like to go along and provoke those farmers. Tuesday, terror in Iraq, 86 Iraqis killed and 234 wounded. So a new round. Says here that it's slightly down from May, but June totals still highest in years. Iran to hold large military drills in the second half of the year. I love this little thing here. USA is the biggest terrorist. 3 July 1988, anniversary of attack by the U.S. aggressor ship to the Airbus. And they announced the drills during a ceremony to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the downing of Iran Flight 655 by the U.S. Navy in the Persian Gulf on July 3rd, 1988. Maliki of Iraq to meet Putin in Moscow. Interesting. Develop bilateral relations. Rocket crash strains Russia's troubled space program. That's interesting. Besides the U.S., they have one of the sophisticated space programs. But the $200 million explosion over Kazakhstan launch pad is the latest of a series of expensive accidents involving Russia's space. So don't even look at the U.S. and what they're doing over there. They have their issues as well. But Putin signs law banning gay couples from adopting. Now this rocket crash happened right after they literally signed. Putin signed the bill banning homosexual propaganda to children. Then that thing crashed. And it reminds me of what that dude 108 Morris was saying about the whole Woolwich. What did that happen? It basically overshadowed the UK passing gay rights or gay marriage laws. So in the global hive mind, with everyone tapped into social networks and mainstream media, they got to divert attention away from things like that. China to join Russia for largest naval drills with foreign partner. Say they're intended to deepen cooperation between the militaries. Several documents signed during joint work of Russian Emergency Ministry and FEMA say the two are going to exchange experts during joint rescue operations and major disasters. It was provided by the protocol of the fourth meeting of the U.S.-Russia Bilateral Commission. Foreign troops are already operating inside America. FEMA denies report of Russian forces providing security at events. So there's pictures of them. Spetsnaz. So China is saying that the West is encouraging these protests or this acts of terrorism, they're calling. I'm not sure how many guns they actually have, so they have knives. Chinese authorities demand knives in tense West and allege local militants are fighting in Syria. Korea says U.S. has pushed Peninsula to the brink of war, saying they said for Washington to accuse us of provocations is nonsense. As Bolivia awaits Russia's technology and energy investment. Bolivia is to lodge a complaint at the United Nations over U.S. ordered kidnapping of Mr. Morales' plane. Thank you.